Hello, everyone. Today I'm here with Janet de Havilland to try to make a video on demystifying IR35. And it's a courageous attempt, I think, by us, because trying to make tax regulation interesting might not be the best thing to go viral with. However, I've been through the IR35 changes in the public sector in 2017. And my guest here today, Janet de Havilland, is an expert in the subject. She's the chief executive of Pendragon Consulting, and I think that this is a challenge that she's knee-deep into. And I'm really pleased about having her on the show, because this is something that I think, if you're not prepared, can really be a big challenge. And our job is today to demystify IR35 so anyone watching can take away simple, understandable takeaways from this session to really apply and get ready, as IR35 is now here. It's no longer a theoretical future. We are living in the changes, and we have to be ready. So, Janet, thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me, Affi. I'm delighted to be here. I'm Janet de Havilland. I'm CEO of Pendragon Consultancy. Pendragon is a compliance consultancy specialist, mostly. But because we are so involved in the employment and engagement of the contracting world, we also offer employment solutions. A majority of my clients that I work with on the consultancy piece feel that they trust our organization, and they then want us to help them to engage their workers. So that's either PAYE, outsourced umbrella, or actually outsourced employment directly on a PAYE engagement. So we specialize in this field. I have a great team around me. We do things like investigations, audits, supply chain compliance, and we basically advise people on anything from national minimum wage right through to this wonderful subject, which is IR35 and the talk of the town, and has been for the last 2 years.
Let's touch on the 3 key tests.
Yeah,
a lot of people know about that. It's an oversimplification in my mind. I'm sure you agree. But let's start there. I think the MOO, SDC, and substitution. What is the simplification way to understand? For a recruiter or for a client or a talent manager, HR manager who's currently thinking about, how do I start with even realizing if something's inside or outside?
Yeah.
So let's talk about that.
SDC is a huge piece. I mean, SDC came out, as you know, in the intermediaries legislation. So even before they brought it in as part of the IR35 reforms. Yeah. And I think the way I'd like to describe sort of I'll come up with I've got an analogy which I think I shared with you last time we spoke.
I love your analogies.
I'll bring that to the fore, the Mini and the Ferrari. I'll do that. I've actually got an expansion on that, what we discussed. But look, in terms of SDC, we do a lot of SDC assessments. Supervision, direction, or control. This control is the main piece of the SDC. It's all about control. Now, to put it in simplified terms, and I'm not going to do this as a technical exercise. There are many people who, if you're a geek, I'm a bit of a geek. I read so much about the technicalities, but most people are not understanding that if you refer them to certain sections of the tax legislation, they're not going to go and look it up unless you are of a particular ilk, you will. But effectively, it's about control and how you go about doing your job. So, the what, when, why, how, right? So in a simple analogy, if a client, and clients are really controlling in terms of contractors because they see them as employees a lot of the time, and they're trying to sort of just fill in. So a contractor would come in to take the place potentially of a vacancy or a special project. But what they're not doing is they're not realizing that if a person is in business, they can't be supervised or under control. Now, supervision is easy because, we can be supervised on health and safety. We can, have to report to a gate for security reasons. Everyone doesn't expect people to be able to come on site and run amok, and you might have to just let somebody know in the building that you've left the building at night. Obviously, those things are not relevant now because we're all working from home. But effectively, those things do not class. That's not control. That's control correct. Is let me say I've given you a task, Affi, and I've asked you to come in and work on a project for me. And we have an agreement as to what it is that you're supposed to do. And let me give you an example of, I've asked you to put up a television for me in the boardroom, okay? And I've said to you, look, I want you to come in and I want you to put TVs wall to wall on here. This is what I want you to do. That's pretty much where we want them, is midline of the boardroom. Have they got anti-glare skins, et cetera, et cetera. So you've told somebody, if I'm in business, you don't need to tell me anything more. You just need to tell me, as you would if I came to your house to do a job, this is what I want you to do, and you leave them to get on and do it. But if I start saying to you, actually, Affi, I don't like, no, can you, I don't want you to do that. I want you to use this size screw. I want you to use this type of equipment. I want you to do it this way. And then when you finish that, come and speak to me and I'll tell you what to do next. Yeah. You are now starting to, you're not in this case hiring a business, are you? You're telling somebody exactly how to go about what they do for you. Now, if they're an expert and they are in business, the reason you've hired them is because they've got that skill set. You do not need to control what they're doing or how they go about what they're doing. And a lot of clients that I speak to just do not understand this when we're doing a working practice exercise to assess their working practice. You can have anything it says in the contract between us that says, you can substitute, you can do this, you can do that. But if this doesn't really truly reflect the relationship that I have with you in terms of how I go about my work, then actually, as we've seen in the Auto Cleanse case 2011, that the contract's out the window. It's the working practice that matters.
The working practices that matter.
It's how I'm actually doing things for you. And equally, I could say to you, when you finish the boardroom, can you pop down to the office down there on the right, and can you just tag on there, I need a few things done down there. So suddenly, I'm telling you what to do and I'm controlling how you do it. There's also something called the right thereof to control. So just because control isn't exercised doesn't mean that someone doesn't have the right to control you. And so that is also a very difficult thing for people to understand.
And Janet, one of the litmus tests that I've come across.
What did you use? Yes.
Well, for me, it was difference between timesheets.
Yes.
I'm talking, I'm just really simplifying it for the clients out there, between timesheets and a fee and a milestone for an outcome.
Absolutely.
I just got some work done in the garage, and the guy sent me a statement of work. He said this was the equipment he charged for. This was the total amount, and I paid on an outcome, and that was it. If I started paying him based on every single hour he was working, had an hourly rate worked out, then again, he's not a business-to-business transaction.
He's starting to look like a disguised employee. Of course he is. And that is the difference. And I keep explaining to clients that you've got to get away from timesheets. You've got to get away from saying to people, they've got to be here between 9 and 5. No. So when I come along and I quote you on the job, I'm going to say to you, well, no matter how much time that takes me, this is my price.
Correct.
Do you have any challenges around me coming early in the morning at 7 in the morning, for example? Can I come as early as I want? Do I actually need to do it all on site? Probably not. It depends on the role, obviously, and it depends on the actual job that you're quoting on. But my biggest, I guess, the thing I constantly have to repeat is they are not people that you're employing, they're businesses that you are engaging.
Correct. That is a great takeaway there. I think that's a really good takeaway. Now, if we were to demystify the other bit, which is moo.
So substitution and moo, right?
Yeah.
So substitution, substitution. A lot of people get substitution confused. I was talking to an agent the other day, and they said, "Oh yeah, no, they allow their guys to substitute." And I said, "Oh right, how do you do that then?" And they said, "Oh, it's fine. When somebody's not available, we've got a pool of people, and we just send somebody else in." I said, "That's not substitution." Substitution means that the guy who's in business, who you have engaged to do this work, actually finds someone of equal skill to carry out that work on his or her behalf. And he will pay that person. You don't have any involvement in that. This person is coming along. You've hired a business to ask you to do this job. In hiring a business, it doesn't matter who shows up to do the job as long as the job is taken care of and the person is suitably skilled to do the job. Now, if at the end of the job you see that person's not suitably skilled, you're not going to pay the full amount of money, as you didn't. You wait to see what the outcome is, and then you pay. Now, there are some instances where substitution like that cannot be achieved. You know, I work with some of the banks, and, you know, in some of the security levels that you have to go in, there's no way somebody can just come in from outside as a substitution and start working in those arenas, which is why one of the reasons that banks and financial institutions have decided not to go down the assessment route for PSCs. Now, the other reason, which people don't realize, is because there's also been a change to the FCA rules, and I'll come back to that. But in answer to your question, substitution is a very, very tough one. In most cases, it's rare to see a business who can truly substitute that I've come across so far. But substitution can be in your contract. It doesn't have to have taken place in order for it still to be effective. So, you know, it doesn't say because you haven't substituted that you're not able to substitute. As long as you can genuinely substitute, even if you haven't substituted so far, that would not necessarily negate you having a problem with HMRC.
Jana, the key takeaway there for me in practicality was what you said it there was, even if you send someone in your place, we're still paying one company.
Correct.
That is I think that's a very strong test, in my opinion, on the substitution clause. If you had a talent, you know, anyone can build a talent pool and say that's a substitute. But now if I've disengaged with this person because they couldn't come in, and I've engaged with a different party, well, that's not a business-to-business relationship. So that is, again, a very powerful takeaway from us.
And also, if the client or the agency then pay that other person in the pool, that is not substitution. It has to be the business that you have engaged to do the work that makes the payment. Okay, so you pay the same payment that you have on the schedules that you've agreed in your statement of works. That's what you have to do.
That's it.
MOO is a big challenge because, as everybody knows, I do advise all my clients to take the test, use the test tool and take the test. The reason I do that is because in all my dealings with HMRC, their first thing they say is, we don't recognize anybody else's tool. Doesn't matter how fantastic they think it is, we don't recognize it, okay? So they only recognize their own tool. Now, one of the things I would say is that you cannot rely only on CEST.
Correct.
It's a bit like having a second opinion from the doctor, right? You should, if you want to take reasonable care, as everybody is aware, and we'll talk about that as well. When you take the CEST, they don't even look for mutuality of obligation, because as far as HMRC is concerned, everyone who has a contract in place is mutually obligated. Again, that's a lack of knowledge from the technical team in HMRC. That is not the case at all. That would mean every single person who's ever entered into a contract is mutually obligated to either go ahead with what they've agreed to in that contract, not be able to decline it, not be able to walk away from it, and it's not real.
Janet, the key litmus test in this situation is the contract between an employee and employer are vastly different.
They're very different, very different. You're talking master and servant in that case, and you know, this is not that. You know, if you're engaging a business, that is not a master-servant relationship. Okay, and that is another great test, actually, Affi, because if the person cannot refuse the work, if the person is obligated to take the work, if the person is expecting payment for the work regardless, so the little things that show this is notice periods, paying on standby, you know, all these little nuances we see. Oh yeah, but I pay him, he's been with me a long time, I don't want him to be out of pocket. I'm sorry, that's not the case, right? As a business, if I'm not engaged with you, if I'm not actually doing any work for you and it's outside of the framework of our agreement, I shouldn't be receiving payment for it anyway, unless I've renegotiated with you and then perhaps either opened up my current statement of works, or the better way to do it is to actually set up another engagement for the next bit of work that they would like you to take part in.
Business to business relationship. Bottom line, there's no prevailing rights that one party has, the other party doesn't have. There's
Exactly.
a mutuality of obligation.
Correct. So the whole point is mutuality. You are both free and equal to decide whether you want to go ahead or enter into what you've agreed with or walk away from what you've agreed to.
Correct.
That is the most important thing you need to understand. If it's not mutual, if you cannot both do that, then that's just, and in actual fact, the cases that HMRC, the high profile cases that HMRC have lost recently have been around mutuality of obligation, funnily enough, and not substitution and not SDC necessarily.
There you go. Okay, we're about halfway through. So if those watching are more confused than they were when they first walked in, then there's all the more reason why you should be contacting Janet afterwards and talking to her business if you need advice, or talking to us at CPL if you need a partner who is not confused about how to execute the compliant changes in IR35. But the next part, Janet, as long as you're happy, I want to talk about bad practices and how to be aware of them and how to run a mile from them and why they're so risky.
Yes.
And then after that, maybe just leave in a few final thoughts and solutions.
Will do. So one of the really difficult things at the moment, there's a lot of stuff on the airwaves around umbrella companies, around tax avoidance. HMRC have been very, very actually they have up their game in terms of their spotlights where they highlight what is wrong, what shouldn't you do, what should you look out for, and they are getting the message across, but there's still an awful lot of non-compliance. And what I would say to contractors as well, because this is an important message for anyone who's contracting. Correct. If you're concerned about your pay, if you're concerned about your pay slip, if you don't understand it, if the person that you're being paid by or engaged by or employed by is refusing to, to explain things to you, where there might be deductions you're not familiar with or you're unsure about, then you have got a right of recourse. If you try and they don't actually, play ball and they're not interested in dealing with you, then there's a Department of Bays which actually looks after the agency. They're in charge of agency regulations. There's many places. There's ACAS you can go to. There is plenty of places that you can seek help from. There's going to be a new website actually, which is going to really, really up the ante in terms of helping people. And that will be coming out and being launched soon. And it's going to be a really great guide for contractors, clients, end clients, hirers, anybody who's just not sure of these regulations. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, beware of anybody saying to you, we can get around the regulations. We've got a really good solution to get around this. There are no ways around this legislation, because what HMRC have been very clever at this time, where I don't feel they were clever with it last time, was to say, okay, guys, if you don't do anything about it, if you still don't move and you don't do an assessment and you continue to pay people after the 6th of April under their current contract, and actually they should have been paid inside, but they're still being paid outside, the liability rests with the end client regardless. It doesn't matter if an agency has been made the fee payer and are making the payment. If you have not got an SDS, for those of you who know obviously about the statement determination status, and so if you haven't got a statement that tells you you are inside or outside this role because of these valid reasons, and reasonable care has not been taken to actually assess that worker, the end client is going to be liable. So really, you can sit on your hands if you want to, HMRC say. You can do nothing if you don't want to. So look, you've got two options. Either assess people correctly and get what you need, which is to keep these people outside and really hang on to that fantastic talent that you have been, maybe working with for some time, or you can put them through an employment solution, whether that be umbrella or PAYE through an agency or outsourced employment. We offer that to a lot of clients. That's Janet, what you need to do.
Two things there that I know on on the ground that I've come across. Number one, protecting contractors.
Yes.
When the end client is a company registered outside the UK.
Yes.
And therefore does not pass over to them because they're outside the UK. Correct. And then falls to the contractor. How does the contractor? So then, in a worst case scenario, the end company isn't showing any interest for UK because they're not feeling liable. How does a contractor protect themselves in that situation?
Look, it depends what the end client, so end clients, I'm working with some really, really big US companies right now, and we are their employer of record here in the UK. So they've got no businesses in the UK, but they engage contractors in the UK. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So they still have a responsibility to make sure those contractors are correctly paid for the work they're doing. Mm-hmm. So what I would suggest that contractors do, and there's many, many areas of support, fellow advisors, decent accountancy practices who can help them, is the only thing you can do. The thing you have to remember about the difference between IR35 and off payroll is, under IR35 is under the old rules. So Chapter 8, where the PSC is liable and responsible for their taxes. They decide how they pay taxes, how much they pay, and whether they should be paying taxes. They decide that. And if they get it wrong, the liability stays with them. So IR35 is still here. IR35 has not changed since I remember when it came in 1999. So it has not changed. Unfortunately, I am old enough to remember that. What has changed is that in the reforms that came in 2017 and the reforms that have just come in, the IR35 reforms are now, there is a new chapter called Chapter 10, Part 2, ITPA, and that 2003. And what that says is the responsibility and the liability rests with the end client, or if the end client is not here in the UK, with an agency that is contracting with that party and engaging those workers. Yeah. So it's important. Now, a lot of people are saying, go and get an assessment, get yourselves assessed as a PSC. I can tell you from all the meetings I have now and I was with HMRC just 2 weeks ago on a call. They're not interested in the contractor this time around. I'm not saying they're not interested at all. There's old claims for IR35 they're still pursuing. Yeah. But in terms of the new reforms, the people they're going to be targeting are the end client and the fee payer, which is agency number one. Correct. So the person with the contract, who has the nearest person to the client, the end client with a contract, that is who is actually liable in the whole chain, no matter how long your chain is. Now, the good thing about it, they just made an amendment just over a week ago that said originally, if anybody in your chain, in the long supply chain, made a mistake or did something unlawful, it would still go back to the fee payer number one agency or the end client. What they have now said is that if the offending party will also be on exactly, which I wrote. So they will still be on the hook for doing what they've done. So look, contractors have to be careful when they need to be assessed against the role, the job at hand. If it's an outside IR35, and I hate inside IR35, the words inside IR35 are really ridiculous. It's just a moot point. If you're inside, you're a PAYE. It's as simple as that. Let's not come up with a tax term that says you're subject to PAYE. You're either outside and you're operating as a business, or you're an employee. Those are the only two options. Simple as that.
You're either outside and you're operating as a business, or you're an employee. Great.
That's it. What a great takeaway. Why would a contractor want to be paid unless they have multiple clients externally that are not involved with agency, where they can work outside? Because not you have to assess every piece of work with its own merits. You can't just say just because they've been classed as inside here that they're inside. That could be because the client won't relinquish control, and these guys are perfectly able to operate their own businesses in a different environment. And so I understand how they want to keep their limited companies, and so they should. So my view is the market will settle. Everyone who should be outside will end up outside, because
Yeah.
people who care about that and who understand it will do the right thing. And all the people who don't care about it and have not engaged with the process and are disinterested, those people will only ever engage employees.
And Janet, now let's talk about protecting the clients.
Yes.
So umbrella PAYE solution.
Yes.
You told your contractor base you've got to work with an umbrella PAYE company, and first of all, the basics, FCSA professional passported,
Yeah.
right? The number one. Number two, we talked about reasonable care.
Yes.
Right. So how does a client protect themselves from and show reasonable care if they've already said, I want you to work with an FCSA accredited umbrella company for a PAYE payroll solution. The contractor does that. How do you make sure that that's continually showing reasonable care?
Okay, so two things. So reasonable care in the term of IR35 means that they have taken, it's quite ambiguous still, but they have taken reasonable steps to come to their decision when they have assessed the contractor. Okay, yeah. So those reasonable steps means someone qualified to assess that particular opportunity project, right? Yeah. So it can't be the administrator who's in the front office every day who makes that decision, because they're not qualified enough. They will not have, they won't have enough access to all of the information to make a fair assessment, and that would not be deemed as taking reasonable care. So it would need to be, either senior managers or hirers within the business, or business owners, or technical people within that business who might be advisors or tax advisors or accountants. Okay.
So Janet, so in those companies where and of course I'm not going to name anybody, but some big blue chips that have come out and said all our contractors are going umbrella PAYE.
Yes, they are allowed to do that. They're allowed to do that.
Okay.
And the reason why they're allowed to do that, even though everybody is saying that's blanket assessment, it isn't. As long as they haven't assessed anybody. So if you haven't assessed anybody and you've just said, carte blanche, I'm not prepared to take this risk, I'm not going to have PSCs, engage with PSCs, therefore everyone has to be on a payroll or an umbrella company, that is a commercial decision that is allowed to be taken by a business.
Okay, and you've exercised reasonable care, all your contractors are umbrella PAYE.
Yeah.
And how do you now vet that supply chain on a regular basis to make sure that those people who are saying that they're compliant are compliant?
Okay, this is my absolute heart of what I do. This goes to the heart of what I spend my life doing, which is supply chain auditing and compliance in this space. We just know that, so certain clients have decided with umbrellas that they're going only down the FCSA route. And I know there's been a lot of shouting about that, of unfairness and not a level playing field, and it's exclusive club. Pendragon, our employment solution, has an FCSA accreditation. I'm very pleased to have an FCSA accreditation. I'm actually a compliance specialist, and I can tell you some of the things that are being reported about the lack of compliance and due diligence is simply inaccurate. You have to do it in order to know what you actually go through. We get audited every year. We've been audited by EY for a number of years now. And, it is a complete interrogation into the business. Anybody who's saying their business is not being interrogated, either are not privy to what's really going on, or they are, in my view, not telling the whole story. Now, I can't say that that's sufficient for an agency to rely on. I say it's a really great standing part, and at this moment, it is definitely the gold standard benchmark. You have professional passport, again, one of the longest, if you like, the longest serving accreditation associations involved with the umbrella industry. And people will have their preferences. I'm not going to get into a spat here about who's better, who's not. What I can say, it's a very different process. You can do those, but that is kind of a starting point for you. What you then need to do in your businesses, I get asked every day. In fact, I've got 5 companies that I'm doing audits for at the moment. I've just audited in a very big company 4,800 payslips for them, right? From their suppliers, to see that, are there any anomalies here? Is the money that we're paying to these people exactly going into the pockets of the people that we said, and have all the costs been attributed correctly? That's what I do for a living. That's what me and my investigation team do for a living. And I can tell you that clients say to me, I've done this, my supply chain, I know all my umbrella companies are absolutely brilliant and perfect. And I show them something and I say, okay, let me just send me something that you audited or you vetted, and let me show you why you might have made a mistake there. You've got to look at everything. So you can't just look at, so the guys, you have to admire the people who are really in this business, as you know, from the healthcare side. These are clever people with very deep pockets offering non-compliant solutions. These are not people who are idiots, okay? Yeah. They have got this down to a really, really, really off pat. So they filled in the questionnaire correctly. Of course they have. They have fronted a good business. Sometimes they're involved with a good business. I can tell you that there are 5 recruitment businesses out there today who are fronted by companies that are completely non-compliant, and all of their contractors are paid through them. So when you say this, I mean, we do very much more due diligence than payslips. We do director checks, we do business checks, we do checks on the paperwork. People are defrauding companies now by providing fake FPSs from the payroll system. Now, I know this for a fact because I'm called in to work behind the scenes with lots of compliance teams. Most people can't spot one. They don't know what a fake one looks like. And therefore, how can you ask somebody to do due diligence on something that they don't actually know what to look for? It's not to discredit the people doing the compliance. There's some very good compliance people out there, and I know a lot of them, and I speak to a lot of them. But there are areas and nuances that people just don't get. And I think this whole furore at the moment, you have got to look at, speak to your contractors. For me, the starting point isn't actually going to the umbrella company. The starting point is speaking to the contractor and saying, I know we put you through, you chose to go with one of our preferred or our supply, compliance checked umbrella companies. How are you finding it? How many people actually check this out? Because there's a lot of anger with contractors out there on the line, in forums, on LinkedIn, on various other places that you will find them. If they are all that angry, that means they're not getting information from the people who are also engaging them. And that, for me, is a good telltale sign that there is something wrong if so many people are angry and hate the fact that you're putting them through the various umbrella companies. There's reasons for that. Why not ask them what they are? Why not ask them?
Absolutely. I think that's the key. The key takeaway for a client is, first of all, you don't need to be scared, but you just need to be aware.
You need to be aware, not scared. There are very, very good. There's around 800 umbrella companies in the UK. Yeah. I wouldn't call them all umbrella companies, by the way. There are 800 companies offering umbrella services. Shall we say that?
Good point.
Okay. Yeah. And therefore, there's an awful lot out there that if you think about it, membership of the 2 bodies between Professional Passport and FCSA in particular, who actually do decide whether people can get in or not. There's quite a high bar now. And what I'm saying is, if you think that's a very small proportion that have actually gone through any form of accreditation, it doesn't mean the people who haven't gone through it aren't good. It just means that they are not in that, you have to assess them separately. So I don't think everybody who doesn't have a badge is not a good company. I just think you probably just have to do a few more steps there
to get the comfort. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Janet, that's great. Let's spend the last maybe 5-10 minutes just talking about solutions.
Yes.
What are your statement of work maybe?
Yes.
What are the key things of a good statement of work relationship and structure that you would recommend to clients who are listening right now?
Look, I think a lot of people are getting very wedded to a statement of work. Again, I would applaud you to have caution. because, unless you know what you're doing with a statement of works, it's not the answer to your prayers, okay? So look, it should include exactly what you're intending to happen in terms of what are the deliverables. So what are you engaging a business for? What is it that you're expecting them to do? What are they quoting on? So the most important thing is if the statement of works is not a good statement of works, you possibly won't get the right answers in terms of the quote and the business who wants to take that on board. So that's one thing to do. There's plenty of companies out there that can help you with statements of works if that's what you want to do. However, you don't have to have a fancy statement of work. You can have an agreement written on a piece of paper that you have come up with, as long as it's got all the salient points in there. Please don't be put off by all this fancy expense. Statement of works needs to declare what it is that is happening here. What is happening? What do you expect to happen? At what points do you expect them to be happening? So if somebody is going to deliver a project for you, what's the key parameters of the project? What are the milestones in that project? Those milestones will probably be linked to payments if you're any good at doing this.
Correct.
Because otherwise, why would you pay on a continuous basis without having any? Look out for, if work goes wrong, what have you got in there to say that it needs, if remedial work needs to be done, when is it going to be done? How is it going to be done? It's got to be done in the hours that that particular individual who's decided to take on that project does. This has got nothing to do with you paying people out of hours. I see statements of works that if somebody works out of hours, that they actually get an additional payment. That's not a proper statements of works.
Yeah. And so the three takeaways that I always look at for statement of work, and I hope you agree, is parameters.
Parameters, correct.
Milestones. And outcomes. And then link those to payments, right? Because in a business, you don't pay if somebody doesn't achieve those milestones. Business to business relationship.
Exactly.
Business to business relationship. That's it.
And in some cases, if they can't deliver, then they're going to be in breach of contract.
Yes, correct.
So, this is what I'm saying. If anything could go away is, please don't think of a person. If they are outside IR35, you are no longer dealing with an individual, you're dealing with a business. Even if it's a one-man PSC, you are dealing with a business and they need to be treated as a business. But equally, the takeaway for contractors, if you're in business, be in business, okay? You be in business, you've got all of the tools of business, websites, how do you get your work? One of the things that HMRC believe is that if a PSC only gets their work from a recruitment agency, they're not truly in business for themselves.
Interesting.
Yeah, because as far as they see it, if you're only being fed work from a recruiter and you work in the same client on a long-term basis, that's not really being in business, is it?
Yeah, fair point.
So you need to go and get work, word of mouth, however you do it, have multiple clients. They are actually going to introduce a one-person company tax if you've got one client. So if you've only got a single client, they're actually considering now taxing you differently if you're only working with one single client.
Wow. Okay.
That's currently in consultation. So really look out, be in business, do what businesses do. You send a quote, you don't go for interview. Some of the things I said on my post, you're not going for an interview, you're in business, you don't get interviewed. Right? Yeah. I've never interviewed a business in my life. I've had meetings with them and I've had discussions with them, but I've never interviewed somebody who is actually providing me with work who is a business. I don't go along. I provide you with my portfolio. I don't give you a CV. I don't do any of these things. If these are the things that are being thrown at you, the job's not truly outside IR35. Walk away and go to someone who knows what they're doing.
Absolutely. Janet, let me just summarize that, if I may. The key thing you said earlier on, which I really want to recap on, is as far as solutions go, you're either being paid as an employee or you're a business-to-business relationship.
Correct.
And that's it. And the various different solutions. We don't want to go in defunking one or the other, or one's bad and one's good, and any of that. I don't want to do that. All I want to say, which is what you said earlier, which is absolutely spot on. You are either an employee, and whichever way you chop it up, whether it's hosted or whether it's paying directly to the payroll or umbrella PAYE, you are an employee, and that's it. And if you're not, it's a business-to-business relationship, where that's a statement of work or a project or any way you're doing it, it's a business-to-business relationship.
It is, and that is the simplification of it. And you know, some people might say to us, we're being too simplistic. Actually, we're not, because unless you get that simple message, you don't know how to actually go about the rest of it.
Correct. And that's the problem. In the public sector, there wasn't a simplification, and the confusion and the misinformation led to even more chaos.
Correct.
So that's it. Janet, I want your lasting thoughts to be that analogy, because I loved it. So the Mini, the Ferrari. I want to, give us that analogy, because the viewers, I think, will really take away with that.
Okay. I have to caveat to the owners of Mini, BMW, and obviously Ferrari. I did not select your vehicles for any reason other than randomly. Okay. Please let me put that on there. Okay. But I thought to show the difference, and also I'm a car buff, so that's it. So one of the way I'd look at it is, if you think of the existing legislation, IR35, which obviously came and was implemented in 2000, you think of that HMRC came and dropped off a piece of legislation, and that legislation said you can engage people in such a way, and you engage loads of people who then had their own limited companies. That they would then take care of their own tax affairs, and they would decide on how they paid themselves. Okay, let's say that's what that was. That's the Mini. Okay, that was the Mini, introduced many, many years ago. It was a car. It had four wheels. It had a gear stick. It still did the business. Job. And you got so I'm the client. I've got my Mini, and I put all my workers in my back of my Mini. Okay, and I'm able to take them wherever I want. They can do any jobs they want, and nobody batted an eyelid. Nobody cared whether I controlled them or anything. Not really. Yeah. Nobody policed it. So it's not that the legislation wasn't there, that nobody enforced it for many years. And I've been in my Mini for years, and I'm as happy as whoever. Okay. Then along in 2017, HMRC said, I think we're going to upgrade the car. And I'm going to upgrade it slightly. Okay, and what we're going to do? Well, I think we're going to upgrade it so much so that it won't look like a Mini anymore. And they upgraded it to a Ferrari.
Right.
Okay. And what they did was they said to everybody, right, we've dropped off your Ferrari now, carry on with your business. There was no manual. There was no instruction. The Ferrari had a press start, didn't have keys. The Ferrari didn't have a gearbox. It was automated, had a sports auto box. And the insurance for the Ferrari was huge.
Yeah.
Okay. So me as the client, I just now thought, how hard can it be? I've been driving a Mini for years. I'm just going to jump into the car. And they then took their workers in that car, and they're driving their Ferrari. However, they didn't realize is their insurance wasn't up to date, because now the contractor wasn't liable for how they were paid and how they were assessed and what tax they paid. You were liable. Yeah. So you're carrying along a load of people in your Ferrari who are not covered under your current insurance. Yeah. Okay. So then what happens is HMRC think this is great. It's been so successful. None of us think that it was successful, but they think it was really successful. We're going to upgrade the Ferrari even further. And now we've come rolling through to 2021, where we've now got the IR35 reforms in the private sector. Now, what I will say to you, everybody, is there's a whole difference between driving that Mini back in 2000, all these years, and driving the current Ferrari in 2021. Make sure you don't get caught in a Mini when you should be in a Ferrari, and don't get caught the other way around either. That's the moral of this story. Make sure you know what you're in. You've taken care, reasonable care. You understand the vehicle you're in. You have looked at it, and you've understood what's at risk. Because I can tell you, if you don't do that, this new legislation will wipe your business out. Whilst HMRC are not going to be bringing on tax penalties initially, they've said they're going to go slowly, carefully. They're not going to not ignore where PAY is due. And just to give you a typical example, if you only had 10 or 15 workers, maybe maximum 20, and you hadn't paid the PAY on those workers, and it had been going on for a period of a year, your liability could be in excess of £200,000. Right? Before you've even realized you've got a problem. The other thing is, when they still introduce the penalties in 6 to 8 months' time, the starting penalty is 30% on top of the tax that needs to be paid.
Wow.
Now, not every business can sustain that. That would wipe out even a huge business. So I would just say to everybody, please be careful. Contractors, make sure that people that you're working with are telling you what is happening. If they haven't communicated with you, you need to be badgering them. If you're worried about it, take some advice. There's plenty of people to take advice from. Clients, if you need advice, there's many people that you can get advice from, but Pendragon, this is what we do for a living. We'd love to give you advice. We'd love to help you. And agencies as well. If there's anything that we can do to help, we will. But this is a very serious matter. And I just think we noticed that more than 40% of businesses are still have not done what they should have done. And we're already here. IR35 reforms are here.
It's here. Janet, thank you ever so much. We appreciate your time so much. I can definitely vouch for the credibility and the depth of knowledge that you and Pendragon possess.
Thank you.
I recommend you as an advisor and as a fellow elite leader. And for myself, because I've been through the changes before, what I'm doing is for the entire month of April, any client who wants to talk about or even just ratify their IR35 strategy through somebody who has been through it before and has implemented it across the private and the public sector now, that I'm giving a 30-minute free workshop to any client who wants to talk to us, free of any obligation, just to bounce that idea, that thought process, to have that peace of mind.
Absolutely brilliant, and that is very valuable. Anybody who doesn't know Affi and doesn't know what he's done in his business, take him up on that 30 minutes of free time. Believe me, and the same for us, Affi. Our first consultation is free. We'll talk over what your challenges are. If we can help you, we'll help you. If we can't help you, we will tell you we can't help you. We don't pretend to people and leave them standing. So I really want to thank you for giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts with you. I know we talk a lot on the leaders, which is a great group, and really, we get great I get information and we get great feedback, and we also are able to, as you say, we're able to share this knowledge with our other elite leader members.
That's it.
And that's great news. So thank you so much.
Pleasure. Janet, thank you.
Thank you.